Welcome back. This is video 3 in our vertical concrete fireplace series. In this video, we are going to prepare that drywall we installed last weekend and get it ready to put some concrete on it. Okay, it's time to prepare the surface for the vertical concrete stones. Now we talked about in the last video that we're going to do two different methods. We're going to learn two different methods of applying this material. One is just the traditional method using just the vertical cement to form the stones. And the second way is to use foam insulation sheets under the cement to create a more lightweight project. And because life is not simple, each method requires different preparation of the surface. So to keep this from being an exceedingly long video, I'm breaking it up into two separate videos. And today we're going to cover the traditional method using just the cement. So we're going to get the wall prepped for that method. Okay, a couple of clarifications I need to make. In this video, I'm using footage from an office renovation I did, and where I created a faux stone feature wall using these same materials, the same method of application. So I don't want you to watch that and get confused and say, hey, where's the fireplace? You can take this, what I'm showing you here, and put it on walls, on backsplashes. I've seen some beautiful wine cellars created with this material. So your creativity is the limit of what you can do with it. Okay, another little note I need to make. I started that project about 4 years ago. So when I started it, I had really planned on sharing these videos on Facebook or Instagram. So they are filmed vertically. So I'm going to apologize in advance for those black bars. I hope that they don't drive you crazy. So this video is going to be a mix of vertical and horizontal shots. And I apologize for that, but there was just no way I could remake the older videos. This is a long video, so I'm putting time markers in there so you can move through it at your own leisure. Also, at the very end, I have about a 20-minute overview, sort of a summary of everything. So I've tried to put something in here for everybody. If you're like me and you like to just pour over all the details, or if you're somebody that likes to skip all that long stuff and just hit the high notes, I've got something for everybody. So I hope you find this video helpful. I'm excited to get started on this. Let's go. I'm going to be rocking the portion that is above a little seating ledge that's built into the lower portion of the wall. So it's about 5 feet up and about 12 feet wide. Okay, it is drywall. Putting concrete on drywall can be a really bad idea if you don't prep it properly and if you don't use concrete products that are specifically made to use in applications like this one. One of the major things that you want to do is use a concrete bonding primer. This is Sika Pro Select brand. I got this at Lowe's. It's pretty readily available. Now it is used, as you can see on the label, it can be used as an adhesive or an acrylic fortifier. Now some products call for, in addition to having a coat of this put on the wall that you're getting ready to put the rock finish on, they call for adding a 50-50 mix of this and water instead of just water when you mix up your concrete. So our rock layer does not call for this, but we are going to add this to our scratch coat layer. Now, before we do that, we will just, I'll show you what it looks like. Now you can pour this in a paint tray and use a paint roller and apply it that way. Since this was such a small space, I just poured some out, actually in a cottage cheese container, into a paint bucket or just something. And I use a good sized bristle brush. You can see how thin this is. And I just kind of cross hatched it. Now, I did kind of have to put my lights so that they kind of came across, because when you're putting this on a surface like this, it's really hard to tell where you've been and where you haven't been. So you'll kind of, maybe even a flashlight to shine across to see where the shine is. I put a coat on, I let it sit about 45 minutes, and then I go back and put another coat on. Because it is so thin, I feel like it needs 2 coats, just to be sure. All right, and then we let that dry. Another thing that we have to do, one of the enemies of concrete any kind, even the decorative stuff that we're going to be using here, is movement on the substrate underneath it. So when you if you take this decorative concrete that we're going to be using here and you put it over a concrete foundation that's stable, if you put it over a brick wall, over a concrete block that's stable, you don't have to worry about that flex that you have to worry about if you put it, say for instance, over plywood, or in our case, drywall. So that's where your lath or your mesh comes in. Now, this is a product called Spider Lath, and I could not find it locally anywhere. And even in the St. Louis area, I couldn't find this. So this is something you will probably have to order. Now, it's not terribly expensive per project, but it does come in what I've found really good size rolls. Ideally, you'll put this across the surface that you're working on in as few pieces as possible. That makes sense. So ideally, if you could take this, say for instance, if I had a full roll of the Spider Lath here to show you, this is 5 foot. The Spider Lath, I think, is in a 5 foot tall roll. If I could start, let's see, get you over here. So if I could start back there in that corner right there and start using my drywall screws or my screws and washers along that edge, there's a stud there to screw into. And then I start rolling it across, and I have my stud lines already marked. I used a stud finder to mark where all the studs are located, because you want to be sure that you attach at the stud line first and foremost. All right. So now when you screw these in, if you just take, I use drywall screws in here. If I was using this outside, I would use something galvanized, something that was made especially for masonry products. But in here, this works fine. So you can see I used a screw and a washer, and a washer even bigger than that would be even better. But you have to have something a little bigger, or I'll show you what'll happen is it'll just pull right through, especially because it wants to spring. This is flattened out quite a bit. When you take this off the roll, it just springs right back to a curved shape. So you have to fight it just a little bit as you stretch it across. So like I said, ideally you get it just in as few sheets as possible. If you do have seams, you want to overlap them about 4 rows. And this helps eliminate the flex, okay? Instead of being like 3 sheets of drywall wide, it now becomes, when you get the scratch coat on top of this, it becomes sort of one layer that's all hooked together by your mesh, okay? Now, one thing I do that's not in the rule book, but I have found it's easier and I have not had a problem, is between the studs. Now, I don't want to stress, we don't want to cheat and not put the screws in the studs. I use an air stapler, and I put these air staples at an angle. Now you can tell it got a little crooked, and I'll show you what we do. So I have it at an angle so that the staples are going in like this instead of just straight in, so that gives them a little bit more grab. And it's good against the wall. And you can see this one right here, even though I have the air turned down a little bit and I have the pressure on this part of it backed off a little bit, it still went in. Maybe I was pushing a little hard and it went right through the fibers of this. So you do have to kind of be careful. Now they will be raised up away from the surface, an 1/8 of an inch or so. That's fine, because we're going to be putting scratch coat over that is going to embed all of this. So that doesn't matter. In fact, you want a little give in this, because our scratch coat we're going to put this on with a trowel and we're going to mash it in. It's going to go behind it. It's going to be on top of it. It's going to work its way through. And that's when it's going to make one single layer that's going to help avoid the flexibility that can cause your project to fail, okay? So I took the trim off of this. I'm trying to think of other things I need to tell you at this stage. I took the trim off my window So you could leave the trim on, tape around it, and just take your rock up to the trim. I'm going to eliminate the trim completely. We're going to wrap our finish around. I've got it all taped off, the window part taped off, and we're going to make it, so that it's a rock frame around the window, and we're not going to have any trim at all here. So when I did that, then I'm left with some gaps that the trim covered. So to fill that, I used Gap and Crack, just expansion foam. And unless you have great big gaps, you want to use this is a 1-inch expansion, up to 1 inch. So you want to get the one that expands the least. You don't want to use the one, that expands, and sometimes you'll see crafters use this in flower pots. You don't want the kind that, you put in a half a cup and it turns into, something that will almost fill up a flower pot. So you want to use this. Give that time to do what it's going to do, 2 or 3 hours maybe. And then I go back and I just take a razor knife. If it's too much, I just kind of saw off the top. Now, one thing about this stuff is the cement product sticks to this really well. So you don't have, as long as it's stable, you don't have little pieces that are kind of, not attached very well. This stuff will stick to that with no problem at all. In fact, when you do concrete sculpture, sometime you'll do this as sort of some part of an armature to put under your concrete because it sticks to it so well. All right, next. Okay, let's talk about taping off around it. Now, we have to do this just a little bit differently. And here's all my tape. So if we were just going to paint this wall, we would just use some painter's tape around the edges, around the windows, down at the floor level. But you have to do a little more than that here. And I'll tell you why. Because this stuff is made to come off easy, to be easy to work with, it tears very easily. So at the places where the concrete meets this, if we don't reinforce this a little bit, you're going to find that as you try to pull this off, it just shreds. And you're pulling off little tiny pieces of painter's tape along the edge of your rocks. Very frustrating, very time consuming. And the first time I did this and I didn't listen to this part, I think there was probably still some blue tape hidden there that people will probably find for years to come. So you want to have some reinforced tape, and I just put it right over it. So why, you ask, do we not just use the reinforced tape instead of, so you're just this is a very messy job, but you're just gonna put one over the other. Because though this reinforced tape will stand up to the cement, to the rocks, we're gonna call them rocks because they're gonna look like rocks when we're finished. It also is very aggressive with the sticky part. I have not found any painters reinforced tape. If somebody wants to make that would be really a great idea because then we could just use one layer. But this adhesive is so aggressive. When you pull it away, yes, it will come loose from the concrete, but it will also take your wall surface away with it. Does that make sense? So in the corners where it's probably been drywall taped, it's gonna pull chunks of that drywall off. Maybe it won't, but usually it does. So if by putting 2 layers of tape, you avoid both problems.
A little clarification here. When I said you put one over the other, I apply the painter's tape and then I go back and I apply the reinforced tape over it. I don't try to put them together before I put them on the wall.
We can talk a little about prepping, covering up the surfaces. Now, covering up for concrete's a little bit different. This is an office, so there's a lot of computer stuff here, and I'm just covering everything. Even though once we get it in this room, it's not going to be dry concrete powder anymore. It's going to be the wet mixed product. You still kind of have to slap the stuff on the wall, and you'll see when we get to that part. But sometimes you can have some spatter. So that's why I've done the brown paper. It goes back. This is the foot wide stuff. If you would feel more comfortable, if you've got wallpaper or something like that you feel like needs to be protected, you can come farther out. You can put 2 layers. You can put plastic. Just you want to protect the surrounding areas. You don't want concrete in your carpet or on your floors. So I put to protect the floors, what I generally do is 2 layers of like the big brown, the heavier brown contractor paper, or you can use like a layer of plastic and a layer of that brown paper. But sometimes plastic underfoot can be not the safest thing in the world. So that's why I use the 2 layers of the contract paper, because this will be messy. And you'll see as we get into it, it is messy. That may turn some people off of the projects completely. Some people will love it more. I tend to kind of love it more the messier it gets. Now, what I'm going to do in here, because I have carpet, is I'm going to tape cardboard together. And so then I don't have to worry about the liquid from the acrylic fortifier, can't get through it. If concrete drops and I'm in the middle of a project and it sits there, I don't have to worry about it soaking through the brown paper. So cardboard, if you have enough of it, especially on carpet. And the reason that I say on carpet is because sometimes putting other things down on top of carpet gives you a slippy, slidey thing, and that can be not too safe. So the cardboard I think is your best bet on carpet. Okay, I think that is everything I need to cover at this point. Now we're going to go up to the garage and we're going to mix our scratch coat. So we start to get really messy now, and that's the fun part. So here we go. I have gathered up the materials that we need for the scratch coat. The scratch coat is the very first coat, and it goes on to help the rock layer stick to the wall, because as we've got it all prepped, we have primed the wall surface, we've stretched the mesh over it, the spider lath, and now we are ready to put this on. Okay, so we have a bucket of clean water here for cleaning our tools. We have a clean bucket here for mixing our scratch coat. I have a bucket here that is the liquid. Now I have already mixed water and the acrylic fortifier 50-50. The bag says you can use a maximum of 224 ounces. That's 1 3/4 gallons, but we're breaking it up in batches, so it's easier to figure it in ounces. So I have that already mixed up here. This is the amount of liquid, the maximum amount of liquid it would take to do an entire 80-pound bag of mortar. So what I am going to do is to break this down into fourths. We're going to do 20 pounds at a time. Now, I have found that people enjoy this whole process of creating with concrete if they can break it down in manageable batches. For instance, I can't really handle an 80-pound bag of mortar. Maybe once I can move it across the room or hoist it up into the wheelbarrow, but I can't do it time and time again. I just don't have the muscle for it. So my husband unloads it for me and gets it to where I can get to it, and then I break it down in batches that I can manage. So we're going to do 20 pounds here. If you break it down in smaller batches, you waste less material. And you'll see when we get down there. Sometimes, everything is something's in your way, you have to move things around, and you get held up and you can't move as fast as you'd like to. I think it's just easier if you've got manageable batches. And then as you get more comfortable with it, you may get to where you mix an entire 80-pound bag. I probably won't do that unless I have help with me. But when I'm working by myself, I know that I will never do that. I have a drill with a mixer on it. Now I'm going to tell you one thing. This is for concrete, and they do not make buckets like they used to. So you have to be really careful with this. This is my old DeWalt plug-in drill, and it has been alive forever. And as soon as it is finished, I will get myself a battery-operated one. But for now, it works, so I continue to use it. It's got some power to it, and you combine it with this kind of mixer right here, and I have blown the sides out of 2 or 3 buckets in my last project because they have gotten thinner and they just can't stand up to this anymore. So I'll have to be really careful. You can use a paint mixer, which is what I normally use, but it finally, I used the last one so many times that pieces of it started coming off the last time I mixed with it, and I forgot to get another one before I started this video. So we're gonna make this work. I have a calibrated container for measuring the liquid. And then I have a spray bottle that's already mixed 50-50 with the acrylic fortifier and water, and we will take that downstairs with us into the workroom with us and spray each area before we start to put our scratch coat on. It will keep the wall surface from pulling out all the liquid out of the cement before it has time to cure. So that's something they have to be careful with when you're using cement. You want to have if there's any absorbency to the substrate you're putting it on and it is not slightly dampened, it will just suck the moisture right out of the cement where it meets, and that can interfere with your bond. Okay, got our bag of type S mortar over here, and here I have a scale.
We need a recipe revision here. The batch I made in this video was just too wet. Turns out filming, talking, and mixing concrete at the same time is hard for some of us. So just remember that for every pound of type S mortar mix, you want to start with 2 liquid ounces of our 50-50 water and acrylic fortifier mixture. So for our 20-pound batch, we're going to start with 40 ounces of liquid, and then you can adjust it as needed.
Now I like this old-fashioned mechanical scale. You can use a digital scale. And I measure out my mortar that way. All right, you want to always put your liquid in first. So what's this? Goes to, it does 56 ounces. So I lost my space there. And you want to get as close, you want to get pretty close. You don't want to get in the habit of cheating until you've done this a little bit. After you do this a few times, you probably will even be able to eyeball how much liquid you want in here. All right, now we're getting ready to put, forgot what it's called, mortar mix. We're starting to put the dry into the wet. Once you do that, the clock is ticking. So you want to kind of double check. You think, okay, do I have everything I need? Is the room where I'm going to work set up? Now, I don't want to make it sound like this stuff is finished in 5 minutes and you can't work with it anymore, but you'd be surprised how fast this stuff can set up on you. Using the acrylic fortifier slows it down a little bit. Oh, here's a couple more things. You need to have your trowels ready, because I have mixed this stuff up and realized that I hadn't got my trowels out of the storage tubs where I keep them. You know, that takes, sometimes they're not where you think they are. So I have wasted a little bit of product because I didn't have these ready. So you just need a trowel. You're going to, a smaller one to pick it up, put it on the trowel. This is what you'll spread it with. And then you have the scratch coat comes from, I guess because you actually scratch the surface of this coat once you get it up there. You'll see. Now they make a comb for this, or a stucco rake, I think they call it sometimes. I do not have one of those. They're not expensive, but I just never have gotten one. I just use, this is for thinset, for spreading out thinset. It's got these teeth on the side, and I just use that. Now the reason we make those ridges, there's a fair amount of weight once we get to the rock level. And if those ridges are going across and you put this rock surface, it's going to be less likely to drag down. Now, if you just had a flat surface or if you had vertical ridges, it's just like a road map for that stuff to slide right down the wall. But these little horizontal grooves that we're going to put in keep it from sliding. Okay, we've got that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I have gloves on. I have an extra pair tucked in my pocket because sometimes, something about the way I hold my trowel really hard is sometimes I punch through the thumbs. These are 9mm gloves. They stand up better than the blue gloves that I think are about either 5 or 7 mil. So these are a few cents more when you buy a box of these, but they're by far worth it. And a lot of times I'll find that if I don't puncture the thumb out, I can take these, I can rinse them in my cleaning water and use them again. Oh, okay, that's another thing. I'm going to stress this 2 or 3 times. Never rinse your utensils, your tools, your hands, your gloves, anything. Never rinse it in your sink, anywhere near your plumbing. Not in your bathtub, not in your wash sink in your laundry room. Always have a bucket of water that's dedicated to just cleaning. Because even the slightest amount of mortar mix, partially cured cement, or even the dried stuff will totally destroy your plumbing. And I don't mean you'll have to empty the P-trap under the sink. I mean, you may have to have serious plumbing redone, and it can be very, very bad, and it will make you very angry at me. So I'm going to stress this to you till you get tired of hearing it. Never, 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 never put any of this stuff down your drain. You're going to have it in this. We're going to, then we'll dispose of the water when we're finished with the project. Okay? All right, have I thought of everything? Oh, this. I can't believe I forgot it because it's choking me to death. You want an N95 mask from the time you open that bag of mortar until you are finished mixing and everything is wet. Okay? And you don't want to play around with this either. This is even more serious than letting this stuff go down your drain. This stuff is murder on your lungs. So this will completely solve the problem. I have a small container here. I've already measured this. This is 10 pounds. So I'm going to put 2 of these into the liquid that I already poured in there. Okay? This is 10 pounds. Oh, see? This is 10 pounds. We're going to get another 10 pounds. Yes, I could have used a bigger container that held 20 pounds, but this was handy. We're going to double check. And you always want to do this cement products by weight instead of volume, because it's like, oops, needs another little bit, because it can really pack. All right, 10 pounds. And you always put your liquid in first and then put your dry in on top of it. We're going to start mixing. Tell you that's too runny. Let's see if you can see how that's dripping off there. That's too runny. So I'm going to use the shovel. Put just a little more in there. Now we can add material. We can add more of our mortar mix now. You don't want to add more later, because once this is hydrated, you don't really want to add more liquid or more mortar mix to it. Now it will set up a little more. I think that's good. Whoop, look at there. That was just the right timing. Now, normally I would put this in my water and hit the trigger and spin it around a little bit, but okay. Let me give you a look at what this looks like. I can take my mask off now. Now this is about as runny as you would want it. You see down in there? But you let it sit for a few minutes, so it's going to thicken up some. Plus, I have to get my camera moved down to the room where we're working. I have to take this down there. I'll have a couple of minutes before I can get started. But we're ready to move things along here. I cleaned up all the tools, and this over here, I'll show you this. That's the first batch. It did about 25 square feet, I think. That was 20 pounds. I'll keep up with all the totals, so there'll be a summary, and I'll put down the how many pounds it took per square foot, or yeah, how many square feet for a bag of mortar mix. I mixed up 30 this time, a little bit thicker, and I'll just show you this area right here. When I get back in the corner, it's a little hard to video because you can't see me because I keep blocking your way. But you can get the idea of what we're doing here, and then it's just repetitive across the wall. I think this 30 pounds, it won't quite finish. I'll probably have to do another 15 pounds, but we'll come close to using most of an 80-pound bag plus the liquid to mix it on this wall. First thing we do, and this is easy to forget, but it's very, very important. This is our mix of 50-50 water and acrylic fortifier. And I usually have 2 of these bottles ready because they are notoriously for quitting on you halfway through a job. You can also use a pump up sprayer if you're doing a big area. I almost did, but I thought I can get by with this. Let's get it to a spray. There we go. Just want it. And don't worry about getting too much. I don't know, what is that? Let's do about a 3-foot square, a little less than that. We're gonna pick up we're going to use this big trowel kind of like a hawk. Now, a hawk is basically just a big square flat plane with a handle out the bottom. So that's kind of what we're doing here. All right, so I'm going to start here in the middle just so you can see. All right. So I have this pretty much loaded up. I'm going to put it against the wall, right? I'm going to take my other trowel and I'm going to push up. You always want to be pushing up and push pretty hard because we want to squish it down into this mesh. So then we get some more. And this is another place where if there's 2 people doing this, one can be loading the hawk or the first trowel, the bigger trowel. Okay, we're going to go up a little higher this time. Push off, push up. Little bits are falling down, but that's why we protect the floor and all the surfaces around us. Now I did pull down then, but I was just trying to flatten out a ridge. Then I pushed back up. And that's basically what you do. That was talented. See, it kind of slides around, so you have to keep it really level or it will just slide off, like you just saw it do. All right, I'm going to come down a little bit, push off, push up, push off, push up, push up. There we go. We'll do some more here. And this dish pan, I just find it easier to work with than trying to work out of a bucket because you've got this bigger open open space. See, when I slid down, everything just fell off the wall. You always want to be lifting upwards. There was a little piece of dried mortar in there. It was causing problems. You'll have that almost always, not a lot. There will always be some. Now, it's thin enough that it makes it a little difficult to work with. Man, there's another one. There's a bunch of them in here. But if you work with it any thicker, you're not going to get it very thin enough. You're going to get too much material on the wall, and you just don't need that much. And it's just that much more weight on your wall. Here we are. Now we have to scratch it, and I'll show you how to do that. Let's do another row, so to speak. Okay. So we're going to go right up next to it. Up like this. And there's another little piece of dried stuff. When you get those dried pieces of mortar in there, they keep your layer of mortar too thick because it doesn't let the trowel push. And I'll show you. So as I go up, like this is the wall. This is about the angle I have my trowel. So I'm pushing up and kind of delivering material as it goes. And then you can come back and do it almost flat if you need to spread it out a little more. Now we have this beautiful smooth surface. And now it's time to take the other trowel or the rake, whichever you're going to use. And where did it go? Okay, back in. And so we're just going to take this at about an angle. So this is on the wall. Yeah, about like this, a little more. Just very little tilt to it. Not pushing very hard. I don't want to take a lot of material off. I just want to make those ridges. Now, there are lots of little pieces. You see little balls of, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and finish, and then before we clean up, I just take a chip brush and or a whisk broom, and I just kind of brush those loose. We don't want to let it completely harden, but it'll start to be a lighter gray, and you can tell when it's starting to set up. And you just kind of brush those away, and that way they don't get into your next layer of mortar. Okay, so I've got probably 40 pounds more of this to get on the wall, and we'll let this sit overnight, and tomorrow, finally, we start getting to the really fun. We start sculpting the rocks, playing with textures, and just making things that look like real honest-to-goodness rocks for a lot less money. And in the end, a lot less weight on your wall. Okay. Okay guys, I know I have thrown a whole lot at you in the last 30 some minutes. So we're going to slow down here and we're going to do kind of a quick recap of some of the things that maybe you didn't get a close-up view of. Plus, it was like 3 or 4 years ago when I filmed that footage, and I have better sound, better video equipment since then. So let's just take a second and kind of wrap things up. And we're going to do it with the help of Wally the Mini Wall. First of all, I talked about the first thing we needed to do was prime. So Wally has been primed and painted, and I went through with the stud finder, marked where all the studs were, and I went around and did the same thing on the side. And then just to keep things easy to see, I sort of lined up and drew a line. You might not want to use a Sharpie marker, but honestly, it probably wouldn't matter. This is all going to be covered up. And the places where the studs are located is where we're going to attach the mesh with screws. In the video, I showed you a couple of options. Screws with washers, or I just took scraps of our mesh material, folded it in half, and made that sort of a makeshift washer. Okay, so we'll start off with the mesh as the washer. You will have to watch out for the screws that you used to actually, with the drywall was installed with. And you can't always see those, but you certainly will find them. And then you just relocate your screw if you run into one and screw above or below it. All right, so that has held that in. If you like to do things a little professionally, you can get these lat screws. They are made so that they have more or less a built-in washer that makes the diameter of the top bigger piece. Then you just stretch this across here. It will kind of work with you a little bit. We're going to go above the screw there. There we go. Okay, now we'll go ahead and pull this around here in just a second. Do you see, I'll get a close-up here, how this is left poofy? Now we want a little bit of looseness here so that we get the thin set in and behind and all around it, but we don't want this much. Now this is where I come in, and like I said in the video, this is not what they tell you to do in the videos, but I have had plenty of luck with it. I haven't had any problem. So if you want to try this, you just use an air stapler, and you make sure you have the pressure turned down a little bit, and then you can just pull up some of that slack with that. Now, if you're not comfortable doing that, you can just go ahead and scatter screws wherever you need to, just like I did with the air stapler. Now the thing is, if there is not a stud behind that, you really only need the shortest screws you can find, because it won't do you any good to have a long screw, because it's only going to grip into the thickness of the drywall. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue with this, with the air stapler. And I say air stapler, you may have one that's battery operated. I just have this big old air compressor in the corner of the garage, so I buy these air tools. They're less expensive. Okay, So that's tight enough, and I'll get a close-up of that. There is, well, that's a little give there. We have this gap here. Let me go ahead and pull this around. This is a lath made for plaster. It's flexible, and I got that to use on the stones, but I really like it. And it's a lot easier to find than the bigger, heavier duty lath. Okay, so I've pulled that tightly. Now, we're going to use the expansion foam, the up to 1 inch, so we don't have a big mountain of foam when we're done. Okay, because I'm left-handed, I always have to get on this side. And it really comes out of there. You have to learn to kind of just halfway hold the trigger down. Or it comes out in a cloud. Okay, this one is made to be upright. Okay, maybe it's not. There we go. And we just make sure that we got that down in that, and we are going to leave that alone. And we're going to wipe off the nozzle so that it doesn't build up on there. And we'll come back and we'll trim this up, and we'll be ready to put some thin set on it. Okay, Wally has had time to sit overnight. This foam has expanded fully and has hardened, so we're going to trim it off. And I think the easiest way to do it is with some form of razor knife that has a blade that extends out like this. It's flexible enough that you can get in there. It's sharp. And it just is the easiest way to do it. You can see how fast this goes. Now, you don't have to cut off every single bit of this. Like I think I said earlier, the cement mixture sticks to this really well. I have a noisy neighborhood. So the only thing is, if you have a duller blade and it shreds a little bit, you just want to brush and make sure that you don't have any little grains or torn pieces that might come off and cause your concrete to come off. Okay, so now we are ready to just go ahead and put some bonding primer on this. Now, I forgot to mention yesterday, after I primed it and painted this little mini wall, I did go ahead and put on a coat of this stuff and let it dry. So it already has one coat on it, so we only need to add a second. And again, you can use a roller for this, for a bigger space. For this little tiny thing, I'm just going to use a chip brush. This is a good way to use your brushes that aren't in the best condition. And again, the brand I'm using here is Sika Pro Concrete Bonding Adhesive and Acrylic Fortifier. There are lots of different kinds. And I haven't found one yet that just completely failed me. So probably it's safe to say whatever you can find is your best bet. Poor Wally's gonna get a makeover. And you do want to go ahead and put a little on the foam. And I'm going to wrap some around the side here. All right, and we're just going to wait about 45 minutes for this to dry, and then we're going to put on our scratch coat. When I filmed that video a few years ago on that project, that first batch of scratch coat was way too thin. So we're going to revisit that. This is 5 pounds I've measured out. The bag comes in 80-pound bags. It calls for, to start out with, 5 quarts per 80-pound bag. So that is 160 ounces. So essentially you want 2 liquid ounces of water for every pound of mortar mix. So I'm doing 5 pounds here. So I have 10 ounces of 50-50 water and the concrete bonding primer and acrylic fortifier. So I'm going to pour this in here. Now this is a little more, because like I said, that is, sometimes you'll, I don't know, if the humidity is low, sometimes you need a little more, sometimes you need a little less. Okay, always put your liquid in first. Okay, now, you know, in the last video, we used this monster mixer, and we don't need that for this little bucket. Oh, I also want to show you one more thing that I found. Since that video, I have discovered these farm buckets. I get them at my farm and home store. It's called Tough Stuff Products Multi-Purpose Flex Tub. And it's not that it's that much stronger than the buckets that I use. It's that it's flexible. So I think it's the rigidity of these buckets we get at the hardware store now that makes them just snap when you try to mix in them with a heavy-duty mixer. So that's just another little point. We're going to use this little guy, and this is a 1-gallon paint paddle. You can get 5-gallon ones that are bigger. I honestly can't find mine right now, so we're going to use this one. And I don't have my mask on. I forgot. This is much better than that other bag. Okay, however, I am going to add just a tiny bit more. There's probably about maybe 3 more ounces here. So now we've used the full amount. Yeah, this looks good. And when you're working with concrete, you always want to add, you think, oh, that probably needs another, I don't know, 8 ounces of fluid. Start with about 4, because this stuff can go to like, I don't know, very dry and mealy, and just put just a little more water and all of a sudden it's soupy. So err on the side of too little water. You can always add more. All right. Got my water down here to clean it in. This is what it looks like. See, it's loose, but it's not soupy like that last batch was. Okay, get the gloves on. Okay, I'm going to dump it in this dish pan. This poor dish pan has had a hard life since you saw it in the last video. And I talked about hawks, that you can use hawks to put your material on, and then you can just, scrape it off onto the wall. Here's I think this is a this is fiberglass, and this is a metal one. I just have 2 different kinds. I don't really have a preference. So let's dump this in here. And I think I have way too much for this little wall, but that's all right. Okay, so let's show you how it works with the hawk. I'm gonna go ahead and use this one. So I've got some, just gonna load up material here. No more than we were doing. I could have just dumped it from this out onto the hawk, but we want to pretend we're doing a big job. I think I've got the camera right now. Okay, so we just line the edge of the hawk up against our surface and we push off. Oh, this little guy's going to take more than I thought. Bye, Wally. This is a little hard to do and not get in front of you. So I'm having to go off to the side. And you know what I forgot to do? This is the hard part about videoing. Before you apply this, you want to use your 50-50 water and acrylic bonder. But we're not going to worry about it on little Wally here. And you'll see, I don't know if you can tell here, it's going on thinner since on the part I sprayed, which is, it's good because you don't want to use more material on this than you have to. Okay, now I am bad to go ahead and just work things to death, and that's not necessary, so we're gonna stop right here. Now we have it covered. And also, when you're on a full wall, I usually do, I don't know, like 4 feet square, or I'll take if it's a short wall, like we did that partial wall in that office, is I'll just maybe do like 3 feet wide all the way down. That was about a 5-foot section. And then I'll stop and do this. And then I'll usually do a little cleanup real quick and move on to the next section. Okay, this is a cheapy little garden rake. And no, it would be crazy to do a great big project with this. But the 2 projects that we've done here, a partial wall, a backsplash, or a fireplace, this is fine. And I really like the little grooves that it gives. And I just do that. It's because of the way it is made, it doesn't chunk up a bunch of material on itself like the tile trowel does. I'm gonna do little side over here. And that's it. That's all we have to do. And that makes just enough grooves that the material is not going to slide down when we get to it. So we're going to let that dry or let that cure, and then when we are ready to do the rocks, we'll go right over that. Now we have a mess to clean up. Thank you for joining us for video 3 of the series. In the next video, we will cover the other option for preparing the drywall to receive the vertical concrete. I so appreciate you being here. Videos come out every Saturday, and I hope you join us again. Until then, stay curious, stay creative, and always be kind. Bye-bye.